residential tech talk, lighting specialist to residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Walt Zerbe joins us from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he is Senior Director of Technology and Standards for CEDIA. Walt and I, like many of you in the audience, were in Denver, Colorado at this time last week, attending a very energetic and inspiring CEDIA Expo event. Our guest today was not only checking out as many new products and technologies as he could on the show floor, but was also participating in multiple CEDIA, the association, hosted education, training, and panel discussions, and hosting the CEDIA podcast directly from the exhibit floor. Today, we'll discuss a little bit about all of that, but most importantly, we'll dive into perhaps the biggest news from the show, the long-awaited release of the CEDIA and CTA RP22 Immersive Audio Design Recommended Practice Document. To quote Ben Hobbs, Managing Director of CEDIA at Home, the recommended practice offers consensus on home cinema design from some of the industry's most knowledgeable individuals. It's a design document and tool for home entertainment spaces of all sizes, accessible to both industry newcomers and experienced engineers. These recommendations allow designers to aim for levels of performance with verifiable benchmarks. Now, in my own words, RP22 is a really big deal for our industry. And here to tell us all about how it came together and what it includes, welcome to the podcast, Walt Zerbe. Thanks for joining us today, Walt.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. And I always love your background. You got looks like a dusting nightmare, but I love it.
We recently, speaking of dusting nightmare, we recently had our hardwood floors refinished, and I had to move all of our furniture out of the main level, which is a nightmare. And I mean, talk about networking gear and all that stuff. I did my best to build shelves so that I could keep things connected. I just had my integrator in today, though, because I could not get my TV to shut off with my Control 4 remote. And you know what it was? It was an IR connector that I did not plug in hard enough to the back of the Control 4 piece. It was really frustrating. So I paid for a service call for him just to go, that's weird. It's in the right spot. It's just not pushed. Oh, there it is. It wasn't pushed in hard enough. So I had him do some other work, some cable management stuff, because it was just like a mess back there. But the shelving I replaced with something from somewhere else in the house, and my wife decided we didn't want there anymore. And I said, great, well, where is that going to go? And I decided I would bring it in here. It's full of stuff, obviously, and it is a nightmare for dusting. But long story short, thanks for noticing. But, it was great seeing you at CEDIA. And I was just having one of my rare breaks where I was trying to take a load off, sit there, talk to Bill Scare at the CEDIA booth. And there you were. And you asked me to be on the podcast that day, which I couldn't, but the next day I did. And It was the very last one. You did multiple podcasts a day. And we literally shut down the show. They were doing closing announcements as we were wrapping up. But it was such a great group. You had pulled together this international collection of integrators and distributors. And I didn't know, I only knew Peter Aylett. That was the only member besides you on the panel that I was familiar with. And the rest were all newbies for me. And it was great to hear different perspectives. Like, what a great collection, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I love about trade shows and I love about this industry is we are global. So I think it's awesome. And we had quite a global crew also on RP22, which I think is extremely important. There are different ways of doing things in different parts of the world, and there's different experiences. So I'm a firm believer in I need as big of a diverse crowd as I can get from a where you live and work standpoint, but also from an experience level standpoint and what you might focus on in the industry as your specialty.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And I know that CEDIA is such an important association globally, and I as I talk to the CEDIA team, they're just different needs, different perspectives out there the U.S. audience is not the same as the European audience and other parts of the world, and there are similarities, but you go back to the basics of building styles and things, but there's more than that that you
Yep.
have to know about. But before we dive into RP22, because I really feel like that's going to be most of our conversation, I want to get to know you a little bit more, just for folks who might just need a refresher on your background and how you got to get to CEDIA. You've been there about 6 years, I think.
Yeah, going on 7.
Okay.
In April.
And so you're well established there, well known for the podcast, obviously, and you have this background with some notable companies, but also a bit of a looks like audio engineering, maybe music education early on in your college time period. If you go way back, is that true?
Yeah, I did some audio recording classes under Alan Kefauver at Peabody Conservatory of Music in Baltimore. So I was basically into hi-fi the minute. Well, I could play the piano. I played the piano when I was little. I could hear a song and play it.
Okay.
So that kind of started my fascination with music. And my dad was a hi-fi guy, so I was infatuated with that, and I wasn't supposed to touch his stuff when I was little, but of course I did. And when he wasn't home, I really did. And then we started making speakers, and I'd get Heath kits and Dynacord kits, and I'd get all kinds of stuff like that for Christmas, which I loved, which kind of threw me into a fascination with electronics. And as most people in this industry, I would say a lot of people got started in 12 volt, or they were just hobbyists and technical people and doers. I had that same honest start of being fascinated by music, being fascinated by technology, and wouldn't it be great to have a career doing stuff like that? So that's the real early days. I don't think I've ever said that before.
Hey, that's what we like. We like getting the new stuff in.
Yeah.
And I think obviously, I guess I probably first crossed paths. I always say that, and it sounds like I can't get those words out. Crossed paths with you. I don't know if it was way back at Russ Sound or if it was when you ended up at Legrand with Nouveau and the OnCue. I kind of blend all that together, so I'm not sure. It probably was Russ Sound.
Might have been Russ Sound. I don't think it was OnCue. That was where I had an integration company that I sold, and AMP at the time when they were spinning out of the hostile takeover by Allied Signal, which ended up being Tyco. They used to use I had an integration company, and they used to use my houses to show their products off. So I decided to get more involved in the product development side of things. So I switched over and went to OnCue, and then that just led to Russ Sound, Nouveau, but a lot of volunteering for the CTA, which was at the time was the CEA, Consumer Electronics Association, and then CEDIA, volunteering for them on their technology council, and then co-founding the R10 standards group. So I did it on the CTA side, and Mr. Dave Pedigo did it on the CEDIA side.
Right.
And the whole impetus for that was, as I was doing standards at the CEA at the time, everything was bucketized. They got the audio guys, the video guys, the networking guys, the protocol guys, and we're like, well, who's looking at all this holistically? Because that's what we do. They said nobody, and they said, well, who's focused on the installation of this stuff? And they said nobody. So that was the opportunity to say, okay, we need a group that focuses on the installation of technology. So that's how that whole thing started.
Okay. Well, and before we move further into that, you were with Nouveau, you mentioned, which is a brand that doesn't exist anymore, if I'm correct.
Correct.
I actually had that Powerline audio product in my house for a long time.
That was Russ Sound.
No, it was.
You had the Nouvos. You had Nouvos. That was before I was there.
Oh, it was. Okay. Yeah. Wasn't a big hit with the integration community because they didn't like the Powerline thing, and I kind of understand that. But it was a fun way in for me to retrofit multi-room audio before I got integrators in here and started fishing wire and network cables through my ductwork. But,
Yep.
I learned what was possible later on. I could have had all along, but at that time I was like, no, I got to use existing wire. And it was cool for a transitional product for me. But that standards thing, I mean, obviously that brings us into this new documentation, and it's really recommended practices, right?
Yes.
It's a different kind of lingo there. And Let's do that.
There's just two words. If something is a standard, then you use the word shall. You shall do this every time. So a great example of that would be an RJ45, terminating an RJ45 connector. That'd be 568A or 568B. You shall put these wires in this order every single time.
Mm-hmm.
A recommended practice is should. In fact, you can't use the word shall. That's like against the rules.
Okay.
So the reason why the immersive audio recommended practice, and we're just going to say RP22 for now because it's a mouthful to say the other one, is a recommended practice, is because we can't say you should put the speaker here every single time, because rooms are different, sizes are different, layouts are different. So therefore, as everyone probably knows, audio is difficult, especially in small rooms. And you need to get creative sometimes in how you solve problems. So that's why this is a recommended practice and not a standard. But it was developed just like a standard would be developed. So under the ANSI accredited process, because the R10 group is a ANSI accredited standards body. And that doesn't mean we can't do international stuff. That's just paperwork. We could take a standard and make it an international standard by submitting what we've done. But the bottom line is we follow a process that is fair and balanced. It's done by consensus. Everybody has a voice. Nobody can strong arm the effort, and that's why that's so important and why we follow that process no matter what we're doing.
Well, as you get into the document, which I told you offline that I had a chance to download the PDF version. You've got a book version there that I was seeing actually at the show, and Peter Aylett was very happy to march around and show it to anybody that would look because he was so proud of it. And he was integral in it, working group chair.
Yes.
But there's a long list of volunteers that were involved, and not to put you on the spot, but who actually did all the work? I'm just kidding. Who actually got who actually got down and actually wrote this thing? Because it was really well done.
Thank you.
I might have changed a couple capitals to lowercase here and there. As an editor, I got to look for those things, but it was well explained and not in a way that like went over my head. And I'm not a techie, like in the weeds kind of guy. I'm like a big picture person. Yeah. And some of the definitions just alone were like, oh, that's how you explain that. I love how like a crossover was explained. And I've always had the hardest time because I'm not able to use that language. Just, it doesn't fly off, out of my mouth as well as some of the audio folks that I talk to.
Yeah.
It was really good definitions just to start, kind of set the stage. Here's the terminology we're going to use. Here are the abbreviations, all of that sets the stage. It also tells you what it's not going to be.
Yes.
It's not about how to measure or test. It's about consumer, not theatrical, spaces, not about how to position speakers around the video wall that we were all talking about at CEDIA this year. That's to be determined later, and I understand that's a big deal for the future, but it's really good just to sort of be up to date on all that stuff and then talk about what immersive means. Maybe we start there. What are we trying to talk about? We're not just talking about like a Dolby Atmos type of thing.
No. And I just wanted to back up a quick second just to let everybody know that we had 18 to 22 people on our work group calls every week for an hour for 3 years. And they would call in all over the world. And that was kind of one of the jokes. What job site are you on? Oh, I'm in California right now. I'm in Idaho. I'm in out of the country. So the only reason why I bring that up is we're only as good as the sum of everybody that's creating this stuff. This is not a closed group.
Yeah.
if you're a CEDIA or CTA member, you're more than welcome to be part of these things. Don't be intimidated by it. You might sit quietly for a while until you get used to it and get the feel of things, but it ends up being professional development and discussions with people you would never have an opportunity to have, but you do on these calls. And oh, by the way, we're also happen to be creating a document. So it ends up not really being work. It ends up being a really heady, let's get into this, whatever we're creating. And it's pretty awesome. So I just wanted to make sure I extended that invite. If you wanted to get involved, it's standards@cedia.org, and we can get you involved.
That's really great. And that career development part of it is really an interesting detail that you stated there, because you're learning so much in the process of doing it. You tend to kind of think that there's a lot of egos and people with big opinions, but when you all are like, as knowledgeable and in the field as the people are on this list, it's there's still a lot to learn from each other. School of hard knocks and actual experience is very different. So
yes.
Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from Elan, Speakercraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Maybe then we talk about what are we saying here in terms of what immersive.
Oh yeah, you asked me what immersive was.
Yeah.
So that's a funny question, because immersive could be a really good mono presentation with a really large screen. The bottom line is what we're going for with this entire document is a couple things. Number one, we're talking about immersive as it relates to multi-channel. So whether that be Dolby Atmos or DTS or RO3D or THX, we don't care. We also don't care about what the room is used for. This isn't for cinema. It isn't for theater. It's for everything. It's for streaming, for gaming, for music, for movies, for wellness, for whatever. Soundscapes, we don't care. So that is a nice wide open slate. What we care about and why we created this is in our world, everybody buys everything based on metrics and on data. You choose what drill to get because how much torque it has, what size bits it can hold, if it's battery operated, what kind of amp hours do the batteries have, cars, everything the same way. But we never had anything tangible for an immersive audio system. The general thing would be you'd sit down with your customer, you'd figure out a budget, be like, okay, I'm going to deliver you a X dollar system, and that's it. So that could be a good system. It might not be a great system. But what we decided to do was let's have metrics. And we created 4 different levels. And the most controversial level is probably level 1. And level 1 means if you don't meet level 1, then we don't believe the system does a good enough job to convey basic artistic intent. That's probably the most controversial. Now, who wins by these levels is basically everybody. The integrator wins because they can say, I'm going to deliver you, Mr. Customer, X. It will perform, this way because I'm designing it to do so. And you can go over the top with the amenities and the appointments, the chairs and the furniture and the lighting and everything else. But what we wanted to get settled was, what is the actual audio experience going to be like? So level 1 is the minimum. Level 2 is a step up. Level 3 meets or exceeds that of a commercial cinema. And level 4 is sky's the limit, state of the art, which is, basically a really nuts system. Now, that being said, it all goes down to room size. And why I say that is what this will do is it will get rid of a lot of common problems. Somebody stuffing too many seats in a room. somebody being against the sidewall or against the back wall, that person now is going to be dominated by the speaker that's closest to them. They're going to have a terrible experience. So level one can be done with a simple AVR and bookshelf speakers, as long as you have the data on those products to properly design those products into a room that is acceptable for that gear. So if you put an AVR and bookshelf speakers into an 8-seat, giant room, it's not going to meet level one. But if you put it in a smaller room, maybe 3 seats, and it's a room that's sized appropriately for that gear, it's going to really shine. So the manufacturer also wins. The customer wins because they know what they're getting. The integrator wins because they know what they're delivering. And the manufacturer wins because they know their stuff isn't going to be used out of context. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that have had systems put in that weren't designed so well. And then the customer ends up saying, well, yeah, I got this, but I don't really like it because it doesn't do a good job. So that was kind of the impetus, is to get back to design and curate systems to a performance level. And then there's 142 pages of that to accomplish that.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to simplify it, just to get started, is that room size part of it. Because I guess I wasn't reading it with a fine-tooth comb. I was scanning, getting ready for our conversation, just kind of getting a sense of it. And I was looking for those elements that said these are the differences, or this is what we're, the most essential part of this. And obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but having just the starting point of appropriate size for the room really kind of puts it in context. And I thought another one was maybe like that even experience for all audience members. It's kind of maybe what you were saying there with the room. Just trying to...
That goes down to your dispersion characteristics of your speaker, of how many speakers you have for the space, like overheads. Did you use front wides? Things like that. We do, and some of the parameters vary between levels. Like for level one, some parameters we just put not applicable.
Yeah.
It's just not, it doesn't matter for a level one system, but for a level 2, 3, or 4, it matters. And then for level 2, 3, or 4, the tolerances are tighter for that parameter going through the levels.
Yeah. And so some of the criteria that you talked through, there's 9 core criteria, and I can read those off since
go ahead, since you have it open.
Yeah, dialogue clarity is the first one, which great. Localization accuracy, and that's probably like a surround kind of effect, right?
It would be everything, because things in, well, you have channel-based audio and you have object-based audio. But basically, when you are in your position, and by the way, the main seat we call reference seating position, not reference listening position, because we're doing a video companion to this right now. So hopefully you shouldn't listen to video, because if you do, then your projector's in the room and it's making too much noise.
Right.
But that is exactly, all those speakers work together as a system. And this RP22 is all about the system and how it performs holistically.
Right.
That localization is, when you're seated, how well does that in that particular seat? Do you have good localization accuracy by the combined effect of all those speakers? So when something pans left to right, left to overhead to right, or front to overhead to back, or diagonal, or who cares what direction, you can track it, because that's the whole point.
Okay. And then the next one, number 3, is sound of movement, somewhat similar. And then 4 is sound field immersion and envelopment.
Yep.
And 5 is tonal balance or timbre.
Yep. That's a very important one.
Yeah. So explain why.
When you use speakers, if you mix and match products that have different timbre, then when something pans between them, that sound will sound very different. So that is something that gets very critical when you get into a level 3, 4 system. Level 1 system, not as much. Level 2 system, we definitely are carrying. But you need to use products that are voiced similarly. I mean, ideally, if you use the same speaker everywhere, that would be the best timbre match you could get.
Right.
But a lot of manufacturers do pay a lot of attention to that and have a model line of different SKUs that do match timbre wise. And that plays a huge role in all those other parameters you previously just read.
Right. Yeah. And as I meet with speaker manufacturers, that's so often a major conversation is that this family all, even though you've got an end wall, you've got a box speaker, they all are basically that same tone all the way through that family. Number 6 is dynamic range. That's pretty self-explanatory.
Now we can just stop on that one for a minute.
Sure.
That's a great, easy one to explain in RP22.
Okay.
The dynamic range requirement for a level 1 system is what? Is that 95?
I think so.
Do you have that there?
I don't have it right there in front of me.
Oh, you just wrote down the words.
Yeah, I had the list.
It's a much lower target than it is for like level 3, which is going to be meets or exceeds a commercial cinema. That dynamic range target is going to be 105 dB at the reference seating position. Level 4 is going to be higher. Level 3 and 2 are going to be lower. So that's a prime example of how levels differ between and how parameters differ between the levels, because the more volume you need, the more amplifier power you need, and the more headroom you need, and the more capable of a speaker you need, and all that stuff starts to ramp up a bunch. And now you're into more cost and more design. So that we thought that was a great key parameter, because many people don't want 105 dB. That's pretty dang loud.
Yeah.
I know a bunch of folks that do, but I personally don't. I like to keep it around 95. So if that's a design goal, then great. That means I can be more efficient with my design and my product selection.
Very good. Yeah. Number 7 is bass impact, which is a good way to put that one, because there's a lot that goes into the low end and the subwoofer performance.
And the bass section is fairly large. Their bass is tough.
Yeah.
That's one of our issues with small room acoustics.
Right. And anyone that was at the Trenoff demo, you saw like an extreme version of trying to solve that problem, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then number 8 is audience coverage, which is probably my favorite one, because that's what you want to do. You want to have that experience be great across all seats. And and then number 9 is sound isolation, which again, you go into a lot of detail at the end about acoustics and sound treatment and those types of things and what.
Yeah. Now sound isolation is another great one that really differentiates the levels. Level 1 sound isolation is super light requirements. Level 4, it's extreme, because you want an incredibly quiet room, and incredibly quiet rooms are purpose-built rooms, and you're talking quite involved. So much so you might bring in an acoustical specialist to pull off a level 4 room. So yeah, that's another great parameter. And then we have our wheel. I don't know if you saw on page 36, we have our balancing performance objectives. Okay, so we looked at all this stuff as being important for the performance of a system, and I'll just quickly read it. There's 3 main tenets, which is what you talked about: the spatial resolution, the timbre, and the dynamics. And then around all of those things are exactly all the things you just read. So that's kind of our wheel of audio, so to speak. And we just did it graphically so we can explain why. Like, for instance, audience coverage is half of timbre and half of spatial resolution. Those two things together make up audience coverage. Sound isolation is purely in the dynamics range. Bass impact is in the dynamics range. So anyway, we just, to try to make people understand where we were coming from with these things and why they exist, we did that wheel.
Yeah, that's great. I have to admit, I kind of scanned over that just in my prep, and that.
Well, it's a big document.
It is. There's a lot to get into, and I, even though I consider myself kind of a visual learner, I'm not necessarily a graphs and charts kind of guy for whatever reason. But that really does tell you a lot with you explaining it like that. And someone had a great idea doing that, honestly, in your group. I don't know if that was a team effort or somebody just said, there's a way that we can make this look really good visually.
So a lot of times people came up with ideas, but they always ended up being team efforts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well, we could take hours going through this whole thing. Obviously that's not going to be possible, but what are some of the maybe finer points that you might want to pull out just to talk about it? If that's too broad of a question, you want me to dig into my notes, or do you have some things you would like to point out that were interesting?
I don't have anything specific to point out because I think you just brought up a bunch of good things that were specific that we brought up. We have some really great appendage stuff in the appendix. Equipment guideline stuff. We have Todd Welty, who was on the group. His experimentation in subwoofer layouts, and what works well for placing subwoofers in a room. I mean, one thing you're going to learn from RP22, if you don't know already, is one sub isn't going to cut it. You need 2 to 4. So we talk about that. We have some calculations in the back to help people. We do have the unified speaker layouts. One area I do like is we did our own chart, and so everybody labels the speaker channels differently. Dolby calls, fortunately, left, center, and right are all L, C, and R in all of these different formats. And I'm talking about Dolby Atmos, RO3D, DTSX, DTSX Pro, SMPTE, ST3077. So for instance, let me pick one. For Dolby Atmos, the height front right is RFH. In RO3D, it's HR. In DTSX, it's RH/RTF. So there's 3 different ways to label that speaker. So what we did is we created a logic system where we have redone, we've looked at all these things, and what we're calling that one is HFR. And there's a reason. Most people would say front left speaker. Because so the address is, or the street is front and the address is left. For all these other guys, they just put L for left. And the reason why we did that is so everybody says usually S for surround. So why shouldn't you do the address or the street first and then the address for everything? So that's what we did. So we could have a consistent way of labeling things. As I said, we're a consensus group. There are some that had issue with that and wanted to just do it old school, the way they learned it. But the group consensus was we should have a recommended way of labeling your channels.
Yeah, that's a great resource there. It just gets you all on the same language, no confusion. The resources, the references in this were just amazing as well. If someone wanted to dig in deeper, to look at what documentation you were referring back to come up with some of these things that you didn't need to reinvent. There was just so much research, you're acknowledging what's out there, but you're just trying to come up with this one place where it all kind of comes together in a way that is easy to understand, right? Yeah,
and that even goes down to your example of a crossover definition. I kind of smiled when you said that because we reworked that one 3 times. Originally, it was just a passive kind of a concept, and then we're like, no, you can do this digitally as well. So through DSP. So and also, what definition do you pick? Because there are, as you know, as a writer, there's tons of definitions that vary on words. So we would go and look at how does Dolby describe it? How does CEDIA describe it? How does DTS describe it? And then as a group, we'd figured out, okay, well, which definition is the one that we think we should go with? We tried not to invent anything unless we needed to, because like you said, more so reference things that already exist and are settled among the community. And when I say the community, we also have visibility with this with the major protocol people, Xperi DTS and Dolby, and then there's SMPTE and AES. They were all part of the review process for this. So we gave them a 140-page document and unleashed it to the immersive audio groups within the Society for Motion Picture and Television Experts, which is SMPTE, and then the Audio Engineering Society's immersive group, um, which is AES. And those guys, AES is all about immersive now because that's obviously been hit. That's hit really hard in the music world.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had like 380 comments come back between SMPTE, AES, and our own internal review and CTA, and we looked at every single one of them.
Wow.
So that makes a much stronger document. It's a great checks and balances. You know, hey, this doesn't make sense, or some would go delve way too deep into stuff, and others be like, this isn't settled science, so we just took it out.
Okay.
So
yeah. Well, that just really tells you how much buy-in there has to be to make this thing official and get it done finally and print it, like literally print it, and go into CEDIA very confident. And obviously, there's a demand for it. You were talking during the podcast how many downloads there already were just there in a couple of days.
What did do you remember that number that I said?
I wish I did.
I'm thinking it was like 600 or 800.
Yeah, that was about right.
We're at like 1,800 now.
Nice. Okay.
So that's great. And the people that made this up, I did want to make sure we get this across as well. I don't know if I did. I forget. Integrators, acousticians, people that specialize in measurement, manufacturers of products, and then protocol manufacturers. So it was a broad reach on purpose.
Mm-hmm. A lot of stakeholders, so to speak, in that. And I want to leave it to folks then to download. It's CEDIA members and CTA members have a free opportunity to download from the CEDIA
Everybody
website.
does.
Everybody does right now. Does that?
It is free to everyone.
Okay, because that's why I put in my email address. I'm like, I think we're listed. I don't know my CEDIA membership status as a publishing company, and it just said you're good to go, and here it is. And what format do you like?
All of our standards will be that way. It's really, I think it's crucially important for adoption to not have a barrier.
Yeah.
Like, you need to give us $250 to get this. Well, that's going to be, some people will be like, yeah, no, I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So they need to be free so that yes, your membership dues do fund, the time of staff and other things to create these things, but then they're free for the world, which is great because you as an integrator, this is a highly visible thing outside of, and getting a little more visible outside of our world, which should ultimately benefit the integrator as well. Because if their customer knows about it and you can deliver it and you know about it, then that just kind of raises the tide for everyone, which is kind of the goal.
Absolutely. And I'm going to make a little plug because you're an employee of CEDIA, and it's probably not appropriate for you to say this, but I think this just shows the value of CEDIA as an association for any of those cynics out there that don't understand why they pay dues to an association. And you're no longer the expo, you're affiliated with it, but that's run by Emerald. Mm-hmm. And you're out there not only doing the government affairs, the Darren Riemann stuff, the advocacy, but you're creating these documents that take years to pull together, and, working with CTA's even bigger organization, obviously.
Yeah.
This is a great just proof of why membership's important and why it's great that we have CEDIA.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that.
But as we wrap up, we'll let people go download this and dive into it themselves. And I think it sort of, if you just take it one page at a time, go through it, it starts to really pull together and make sense. So we don't need to over explain it. But as you walked around CEDIA Expo, I'm assuming you had enough time to just kind of absorb overall trends and technology developments. What were some of the things that jumped out at you as things that are kind of driving what's going on, whether it's audio or video right now?
One thing which I did mention on the podcast, there pretty much is no bad product. So the need for an integrator to separate themselves on the empathy side with their customers and on their customer service and on their design became pretty evident to me. Back in the day, people would maybe lean more towards brands or more towards technology. But technology, other than AI moving into our space, technology is just has marginal gains every year.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have like groundbreaking stuff other than AI. So the product's really great. That being said, I was quite impressed with how video walls are going.
Yes.
I've seen some. I'm quite impressed with how short throw projectors
Mm-hmm.
are going. I saw chat now be integrated, Chat GPT be integrated in a control product
Mm-hmm.
that made it very easy to program scenes and macros, to use an old school term,
Yeah.
to happen both from a programmer's point of view and from a homeowner's point of view. So now we're solidly, that's like, I know we've had AI in our industry to improve picture quality and other things like that, but this is one of the applications of AI I've seen that's really changing the way we interact with equipment and the way we program with equipment. I know one of the things we were saying during the show is English is a new programming language. A lot of people that don't know Python or HTML or things like that can now use English, to generate those scripts. And so I think we're on a really exciting point of being able to take control to another level, both from what it can do and from a standpoint of how easy it is to implement.
Yeah, I think those are great observations. The natural language aspect of control, just from a voice control type, has been a conversation for a while. We weren't calling it AI, although there's a prominent company in an industry with AI right in their name. But the other control companies also finding ways to integrate that now, and maybe even more than one company that there's one obvious control company, since we're going to play this game of being agnostic, that plays well with Apple. Let's put it that way, right?
Yes.
So they have a natural language kind of application. It's also the Apple, what is it called? The tasks or whatever they are, the shortcuts.
Yep.
And so using that, which is something you let Apple do all the hard work and heavy lifting, and then integrate that in so that you can make some changes and give control for the
I think it's the
consumer.
automator or the automations that is utilized from Apple's side. Yep.
Right. And then a competitor of that company is also doing something similar to that. So it's very much we're kind of coming at consensus again there with the ways that we can do this in a simpler way, and also the AI part of it. I had to stop and say, are we using this as marketing, or is this really AI?
Yeah, totally.
And I think it really was AI in the kind of pure sense of things that are going to improve stuff, not scare you and take over and tell you bad things that aren't true. So I know you were involved in some discussions there with AI. I know that's a big part of education right now, just trying to stay ahead of it and understand where integrators can use it in their even their web design and their communication with clients and all kinds of things, and all the questions that come in, and what is yours and what is created, and is it accurate? Are you editing it? So there's so much about AI that was part of CEDIA right this year, and still to be figured out. But from a good side of things, I agree with you that those are developments that we like to see, and all the video stuff. I said that several years back, right before 4K came along, Expo had become kind of a black boxes show.
Yes.
And it was a very important problem solver kind of technology, but not very fun to talk about unless you're just really into that. And then the video companies kind of had to come back and say, help us with 4K. And then, whatever is going on beyond that, and expensive OLEDs and things. And the show became much more visual again, and we started having fun again. I think it's a great combination of that now, and it was a really great event.
Yeah, I think we're really maturing, and I was on a session done by the DEG with Mark Feiner, which was very encouraging for me, because now we're starting to get the eye of the content creators and providers. So this was a session that had a senior vice president of content for Peacock and the senior vice president of content for Paramount Plus about live sports. And some of the things that that you can do with live sports. They're interested in our space. Obviously, our customers are stickier than a regular Joe that might download an app for a week or two and decide not to do the service. It's neat that they're interested in our channel. I walked these guys around and showed them the kind of stuff that we do, and they were like, "What the heck?" And the only reason why I raise all this is we got a big miss. The one thing that's really missing on the show floor, and back to that empathy thing, and back to that how do you service your customer thing, what we're missing is the content concierge service. It's so, back in the day, we delivered hardware and we walked away because people put discs and tapes in things. Now it's a really complicated landscape of how you find content. How do I find this team I like to watch? How do I get this channel? What box do I need? And guess what? It changed, because now a licensing thing happened and now it's not there anymore. And now it's somewhere else. That to me is a bane of my existence. And it is for your customers. So that was one of the things we talked about as well, is we as an industry really need to be stepping up our game. And I don't see why there couldn't be RMR on this, just like there is with firmware updates and providing people health checks for their systems. I think that's an area that we need to be moving into.
Yeah, I missed that panel. That was the major miss for me. I really wanted to be there, and I just couldn't get away from the show floor. I'd so packed my schedule, and
I get it.
I even lied to Mark Feiner and told him I'd be there, and it was terrible. I felt terrible because I knew I couldn't make it. But it was. I read about it in the Daily, and it was sounded great. And I agree with you. One of the major questions, it used to be, what type of TV should I get? What technology? What's this OLED thing? Now the question is, can I just get rid of my cable? Can I get a streaming service? What am I going to miss? And I'm like, well, you can't be a channel surfer like you used to be. You got to jump around a little bit more than that. But there are ways to have live TV, obviously, the YouTube and the Hulu and all that. But then you need to know that each thing kind of adds a little bit more cost, and you're not going to get back to what cable cost you, which was outrageous and is outrageous, but it still does add up, and you're going to be hopping between apps, and certain things suddenly you can't get a NFL football game on a network channel anymore. So you've got to have another service. So all that stuff, it's a moving target. There's never one final answer on it all, but unless as an integrator, you're up to speed as much as you can on all of it, you're not really being that trusted advisor anymore to your client as much as you could be.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I talked to my own integrator. I said, if I'm choosing between Hulu and YouTube, what are you seeing? And it's like, well, here's what a lot of the clients are finding from these two things. And I made my own decision based on interface and, what I felt comfortable with. But I think you just kind of have to be experiencing it as an integrator and being able to give firsthand perspective. If you can get paid something for that or provide a bundle, that would be ideal down the road. So good to hear that's a possibility. Well, I appreciate your time, Walt. We've covered a lot here, and there's so much more to learn about RP22. And thank you so much for giving us just a taste of it today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Can I give you a little hint of what's being worked on that's coming down the pipe?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So we have an effort called RP1, which is performance facts. That's our next effort that will be released. We're hoping to have that released next year. And that is about having, think of a nutrition label on food. We want a nutrition label on products. a lot of things like speakers and amplifiers, you don't have enough data on the product to know if you can use that in a design. So it will cover this many seats at this kind of a volume level in this size room. They might be more marketing oriented specifications and leave out a lot of data that you actually need. So our phase one is for speakers and amplifiers. And I'll give you just a little example. We got rid of the term watts for output of an amplifier because watts vary wildly. So it's now voltage capability, short term, long term. We're using decibels and things like that. So that's one effort. We're also working now on the companion to, and the reason why I mention these is it's a kind of a 4-legged stool. So that's the second leg of the stool. RP22 is the first. RP1 is the second. The third is RP23, which is the Immersive Video Design Recommended Practice. So that's the same thing as RP22, except for video. So we'll have 4 levels of video performance. That's the third leg. And then the fourth leg is a recommended practice on how you measure. And I know everybody measures differently. They all kind of roll their own, whether, how they place mics and how they window things and all this stuff. So we're going to do a recommended practice for how you can measure an as-built room. And I think that will be very useful. And there's your 4 legs.
Well, great. I hope that the process is going to be smooth and maybe not take as many years as RP22 did. Now that
I don't think so. Down. We're doing a bunch of stuff in parallel now, so we can. We've been doing this for a while, so we can have faster releases. I hear you loud and clear. We talked about this a while ago. Oh,
that's great, though. I appreciate that. That's a lot of work and not a criticism at all. But it seems like you got a great foundation now with RP22 and a great model to follow. So. We look forward to those new developments as they come along. So thank you for that preview. Walt Zerbe is Senior Director of Technology and Standards for CEDIA. You can track down Walt at CEDIA.org or on LinkedIn. And you can get the full CEDIA/CTA RP22 Immersive Audio Design Recommended Practice documentation free at cedia.net/advocacy/RP22. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcast. Please check out prettyeasypodcast.com if you want professional and affordable production help on your own podcast. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you watched or listened to this episode. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at our magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.